The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is one of the most influential video games of all time. It's been talked about to death, but for good reason. Even though it was released over 20 years ago, it still holds up as one of the best Zelda games of all time. Well, let's get something straight. I am not a Zelda fanatic. I can count on one hand how many games of the franchise I've beaten. My video game expertise is with the Mega Man franchise. You may be asking yourself, why am I doing a video on a Zelda game if I'm not a huge Zelda fan? Well, a friend of mine has requested me to do a ranking of the game's dungeons, so that's what I want to do. And the person who requested this, I'll get back to playing Twilight Princess when I have time, I promise. Please don't kill me. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and list the ground rules for this list. Number 1. This list only includes the main dungeons, so no Ice Cavern, no Bob in the Well, and no Gerudo Training Ground. Number 2. The entire dungeon was taken into consideration when making this list. The boss, the mini-bosses, the music, layout, everything. Number 3. This is a ranking of the N64's dungeons, so things added or taken away in the 3DS remake will not be considered. Not because I think the game is bad or anything, I just haven't played it. So it'd be unfair to include anything from that version. One last thing, this is my opinion. If you played my Mega Man Maker levels, you know how much I know about game design. So take everything I say here with a grain of salt. The Water Temple is probably the most infamous part of Ocarina of Time, and for good reason. I'm just gonna rip the Band-Aid off right now. This place sucks. Because I'm nice, I'll go with the positives first. The music is nice. It really sets the mood and makes you feel like you're in this ancient cistern. I like the long shot and the falls that come with it once you get it, and yeah, that's about it. Time for negatives. First of all, this place is fucking ugly. If you're playing the N64 version, when you're walking through the thin hallways, you can see out of bounds if the camera's positioned right. I know it's also visible in some of the game's other dungeons, but that was the most noticeable for me here. Another problem is the difficulty balancing with the bosses. The mini-boss Darkling is by far the hardest part of the game. This motherfucker will mimic your every move and kick your ass. I have yet to beat this bastard without cheesing this fight. On the other hand, Morpho, the actual boss of the temple, is pathetic. If you have the big Goron sword, this fight can be over in about 10 seconds. In terms of enemies, most are underwater, so you have to use the hookshot to kill them. I don't have a problem with this, as it makes the combat here unique. What I do mind is the Tektites. There's that one above the water elevator that can blindside you, and pretty much every time you raise the water level or go back in the main room, these assholes are here to grease you. Speaking of raising and lowering the water level, holy shit. I know this has been talked about ad nauseum, but dear God, the raising and lowering of the water level is so stupid. Come to a locked door without a key? Oh boy, are you in for a treat. Now you get to go through the tedious process of raising and lowering the water level and going in every room that's accessible to find the key you missed. I wouldn't be so mad if this didn't happen to me multiple times throughout the dungeon. When I played this game again for the first time in a couple years a few months back, I spent 3.5 hours in this dungeon alone. I know the 3DS version makes it easier with the color coding and everything, but I'm not talking about that version now, am I? If I had to pick one word to describe the Dolongos Cavern, that word would be boring. Every dungeon in Ocarina of Time stands out and has its own distinctive theme. I hate the Water Temple, but as I mentioned already, I love the overall aesthetic of that temple. Dolongos Cavern is just a cave. A cave with a floor made of liquid hot magma, but a cave nonetheless. The only memorable set piece in the entire dungeon is the giant Dodongo skull. This place didn't even get its own distinctive music track, as it just plays the generic cave theme found in much of other areas in the game. One of which you've already had to explore if you want to get the shield to even get into this place. What does this place have going for it then? Bombs. You want it? It's yours, my friend, as long as you have enough rubies. I apologize for that. This place is bomb puzzle galore. You want them? It's
Shut the hell up! Shut up! Shut up!
Anyway, the boss here is King Dodongo, who I find fun even though he's pathetically easy. Overall, Dolongos Cavern is a pretty harmless dungeon, but it pales in comparison in design and theming compared to the rest of the game's dungeons. The Great Deku Tree is the first dungeon in Ocarina of Time, and it comes to a lot of the first dungeon perks. Difficulty here is pretty low, the enemies and obstacles are trying to teach you more than kill you. Even though this place is pretty devoid of difficulty and set pieces besides the giant web in the center you have to crash through, it's not a bad dungeon at all. Despite its cakewalk difficulty, traversing the place is pretty fun. Challenges are fun, the combat is enjoyable, and the boss is fun to obliterate. The last thing I have to mention here is where the dungeon takes place. You're inside a giant tree. That already makes it more interesting and unique than the boring old cave known as the Dolongos Cavern. A lot of people don't consider Gans Castle a proper dungeon. This is my list, so we're going by my rules. My final dungeon standards, it checks all the regular boxes. A combination of puzzles from previous dungeons? Check. Encounters with some of the strongest enemies in the game? Check. Built up tension leading up to an epic final boss encounter? Check, check, check. In terms of sheer epicness, it goes above and beyond. Nothing can top climbing the staircase to the tower, fighting Azafos and Iron Knuckles, all with that organ music in the background. The encounter with Ganondorf is just a game of tennis, but it's an epic game of tennis. The escape sequence that comes after leads up to one of the greatest final boss encounters in history. The only thing that holds Gans Castle back from being any higher is the actual mini challenges in the beginning. Most of them are just sort of rupee hunting, and none of them last long enough to be anything that interesting. In terms of theming, storytelling, and music, it gets an A+. In terms of everything else, it's not the water temple. Okay, I'll stop making fun of the water temple now. The horse is dead and I'm beating it to a pole. I have pretty mixed feelings on the Shadow Temple. On one hand, I love the theming of the whole place. This long-forgotten torture chamber used to punish enemies of the Hyrule family stands out as truly menacing and evil compared to the other game's dungeons. Music here is appropriately creepy and sets the mood perfectly throughout the dungeon. However, it only gets you so far. I have a few problems with this place, one of them being the mini dungeon that takes place beforehand. Autumn of the Well shares the same music, tiles, enemies, and mini-boss as the Shadow Temple. By the time you get to the Shadow Temple, you've already seen most of what it has to offer. My other big complaint is the item you go into the well to get, the Lens of Truth. The concept is cool, but the gimmick of constantly using it to see hidden chests, enemies, and doorways overstays welcome pretty fast. This is one of my least favorite dungeon items, and I was not happy to see it return in Majora's Mask. Apparently, I'm the only one who thinks this, as all my friends love it. Maybe I'm in the minority here, but once again, it's my list, so I really don't care. I will compliment the actual dungeon item, the hover boots. For the most part, I like the puzzles and platforming that involve them. The boots have a pretty cool design too, with little wings on the side of them.
Yeah, a wingman, yeah.
Just remember to take them off during the actual boss fight with Bongo Bongo. Speaking of Bongo Bongo, he has a pretty cool backstory, one that spawned a lot of interesting theories concerning who he was when he was still alive. Check them out sometime. I know what you're thinking. Why on God's green earth is this dungeon this high on the list? It's common knowledge that Jabbas Belly is the grossest dungeon in the game and is thereby terrible. I've heard this a lot, but I've never agreed with it. Well, the it being gross part I agree with. The dungeon music here is easily the worst in the game, and the mini-boss is a pain in the ass. Besides those things, the rest of the dungeon is great. First, the location. I've already established that being inside the fish is kinda gross, but also really unique. Every other dungeon is some type of ancient temple or dark cave. Jabbas Belly stands out as one of the most unique dungeons in the series. Then again, I haven't played most of the series, but that is neither here nor there. The second thing I love about this place is the dungeon item, the boomerang. I love using the boomerang against the enemies here, as well as using it to make platforms and hit switches. It's a shame this is really the only place we get to use it, since you become Adult Link right after this dungeon. The last thing I want to give shoutouts to is the boss, Baronade. He's easily my favorite boss in the game due to his battle constantly changing the way you dodge and attack him. With that, there's only 3 dungeons left to go. Only 3 dungeons left, and all wouldn't be out of the place in the top spot. The Spirit Temple is many people's favorite dungeon, and for good reason. It's unique in the fact that you have to visit it twice, once as Young Link and once as Adult Link. I'm not sure if following the Master Quest where you have to visit it twice is both. That version of the temple sucks and not being mentioned again here. Maybe another time. In the base game, the dungeon is brilliantly split into 2 sections, which don't overlap unless necessary. I love this design choice, as it makes both sections feel like they're their own thing, because they are. In terms of the design itself, the puzzles are top-notch. Using the mirror shield to reflect light in fun ways is one of my favorite parts of the game. The mini-boss, Iron Knuckle, is a game of cat and mouse, and it's a blast to fight. For all the positives I mentioned, this place sounds like it should be in the top spot, right? Well, I do have a few gripes with the place. The first is the music. Now I know music is subjective, and a lot of people love the Spirit Temple theme, but I can't see it. Well, of course I can't see. It's a song. Never mind. Anyway, the song starts out great, but once the main instrument kicks in, it loses me. Speaking of music, I was never really a fan of Ruto Valley's music either. I always thought it was overrated compared to Zora's and Mandragora.
What the hell are you talking about?
Alright, I get it. Enough of the music. One more thing about the temple itself, then I promise I'll stop shitting on the dungeon I put in 3rd place. The boss. I liked when Nora's design, but the fight sucks. It's too easy, and most of it is just you waiting for her to attack. That is all. There's only 2 dungeons left. I pretty much knew where everything was going to place while making this list, with the exception of these last 2. I think both dungeons are rich in design and theming, and either of them could have been put in the top spot. However, there must be a winner. So honor the dungeon that came in 2nd place. I love the Fire Temple. It's located inside an active freaking volcano, and it's guarded by a giant fire-breathing dragon. The Fire Temple also has some of my favorite sequences in the entire game. I love crossing the rope bridges over lava while fire spews out from under you. I love the tiki statues and doors throughout the temple. I love the chase sequence with the wall of fire. I love the mini-boss. I love the actual boss. I love the dungeon item. Most of all, I love the music. The music in the original version, that is, which is the one you're hearing in the background right now. I get why it was removed, but it's so much better than that knockoff version that plays in Master Quest in the 3DS version. That version just sounds like a knockoff Shadow Temple theme. As cool as the Fire Temple is, it's not number 1. Why is that? Well, I have a few problems with this place. I mentioned before that I like the challenges this temple has to offer. While I like most of them, a few rub me the wrong way. I hate the room where you have to use the Megaton Hammer and only have a short amount of time to reach the chest. I hate the boulder room, and I especially hate the room with the stupid gotcha firewalls. With all that said, I still think it's a great dungeon. Hell, it's in the number 2 spot. However, there's one that I think is better. Yeah, I know it's cliche to put the Forest Temple as the best dungeon in Ocarina of Time, but I really don't care. This place deserves to be the top of the list. This place has everything I love with the Fire Temple and more. It has immersive theming, fun challenges, a sense of mystery, interesting puzzles, and the best dungeon music in the game. I do really enjoy the Fire Temple music, the original at least, but I enjoy the Forest Temple music that much more. There's the main hall, the elevator, the overgrown courtyards, the checkerboard room, the basement right before the boss, and my personal favorite, the twisty hallways, which you get to go through normally and when they're screwed up. While traversing the temple, you get to hunt down different colored ghosts called the Pose Sisters one by one to reactivate the elevator in the main room. I love these little encounters, as it makes me feel like I'm on one of those ghost hunter shows. After all that, you get to fight Phantom Ganon, who some people don't like fighting since the second half is just another game of tennis. To those people, I say, screw you. This fight is awesome. The paintings on the wall are even a throwback to when the game was supposed to take place only in Gans Castle, and the different worlds should be accessed like paintings in Super Mario 64. With all that said, I think I've made my case why the Forest Temple is the best dungeon in Ocarina of Time.
The best.
Well, that just about does it. All 9 dungeons in Ocarina of Time rank from worst to best. I won't be doing this for any of the other games, as I better get back to playing Twilight Princess before I'm killed in my sleep. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, I hope you got some enjoyment out of it. Now, if you'll be so kind,
Get out of here!